Welcome to Tales She Told Me, a podcast featuring honest conversation about what it means to be a woman, a mother, and in business. I'm your host, Farrah Haidar. Today, we will be discussing friendships, especially later on in life. And joining me is Illa Lynn. Illa Lynn is a tenured corporate professional with a deep passion for life coaching and personal development. At 18, she came to the U.S. from Europe in pursuit of the American dream. As a chronic people pleaser, she experienced a great deal of challenges in her personal and professional life. To better understand herself and the humans around her, she sought to study psychology. Her track record forced her to take the path of least resistance in her career, which she stayed in for 2 decades, until she found herself in the hospital. Approaching her 40s, she found courage to step out and follow her dream of serving others. Starting over was scary, but Illa went on to find her coaching and consulting business soon after, and now serves professional women as a relationship coach and dating strategist. Illa is on a mission to help women open their hearts to love after heartbreak and become confident, secure, and authentic in their relationships. So, Illa, this is a topic that really resonates with me because I talk a lot about finding a tribe. And as I've grown older, my appreciation for friendships and really having a tribe has just grown exponentially. I personally have very little family around me, even though I come from a really big family. So my friends have become my family, but I've also struggled as I've gotten older to make connections with other women, for a variety of reasons, whether it's time, interests, kids, etc. So talk to me about friendships at a later age. What's different about them?
Most definitely, Farah. Thank you. So, as adults, I think we find it really hard to kind of maintain it, to have that consistency that we had, let's say, when we were single and in our 20s, right? Because life steps in, the responsibilities, the kids, and trying to juggle it all really leaves you depleted at the end of the day. And a lot of times, even though you want to keep connected, you kind of tend to want to just sit on the couch and rest and be in peace.
Hmm.
And so I think a lot of adults have really chosen that over having a conversation and being on a phone maybe and meeting people as they had, just as a means to relax, right? Because
Yeah.
getting on the couch, lifting your legs up after a long day,
That
it's
recharge.
very
Yeah.
easy, right? It's how you recharge. Because for me in particular, I consider myself, actually an INFJ. So I'm an introvert
Yeah.
with, however, I do have sort of a switch that makes me an extrovert
Yeah.
when I'm in the right group. But I get depleted when I'm
Hmm.
with certain people. And so, to be honest with you, I'm avoiding of actually going out and hanging out with a lot of my friends.
Okay.
So no, I know this is so blunt to share, but I have to share this with you because I think a lot of us feel that way, where
Yeah.
it's like, I want to spend time, but as adults, I believe that we need to be choosy in terms of who we allow into our
Yeah.
space and our energy. And so, a lot for me was really, I've detached to so many people from my past life
Hmm.
because I've discovered that every time we were together, I was more drained than filled up and fulfilled. And
Yeah.
you don't notice that until you step out into this space where you're like, okay, you're serene, you're peaceful, you are able to be yourself, right? Because
Yeah.
so many are putting up a mask and pretending to be something they're not, and that is exhausting. Keeping up that mask is exhausting, and that's why
Yeah.
choosing your friends that lift you up, that you can be yourself around, is crucial, but it's really hard to find.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that. I think you just become choosier as you grow older. You're not willing to put up with some of the things you were when you were younger, or you just know yourself more. I mean, some of the things you just grow out of or you don't find fun anymore, and suddenly you're looking around, you're like, Okay, this may not be my tribe. So great. We have this we've set the stage. So now let's talk about what do you think we can do to kind of start finding those friendships?
So, some of the things that I found to be beneficial is to develop a sense of curiosity. So, when you're curious, you want to get to know people, right? When you get to know people, you want to get interested in them, in their story, right? You want to learn about their upbringing. You want to connect with them in that sense, to make them feel heard and seen, because a lot of that really does not happen. Everybody kind of talks about themselves all the time, and you can't really find a friend who is interested in you. Like,
Hmm.
tell me what's really happening in your life.
Hmm.
And so you go and you find people in terms of, I mean, they're groups, they're book clubs. You can explore different hobbies. You
Hmm.
can sign up for a class. There are local Facebook groups that you can explore. I mean, there's a variety of things. It's just that you have to have this inquisitive nature
Hmm.
to want to put the time in and effort in to actually look for them. Because there's so many out there who are also looking for the same, but you're not going to find each other unless you've actually taken the time to step out and actually look for them.
So what
Right. So
I'm
it's really
hearing,
being intentional.
yeah, so being intentional, what I'm hearing is making it a priority, right? Like,
One of
just
your
like,
priorities,
yeah, one of your
definitely.
priorities, just like you would make going to the gym, brushing your teeth, etc. Like scheduling time for it on the calendar, making it non-negotiable. So I think that's a
Exactly.
great one. But I also think, do you think that people often feel like they're the only ones? Like that's one of the things I felt like I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only one who struggles. But listening to you, it sounds like you make a business out of people that feel that way.
To your point, I think we all feel like we're the exception, right?
Mhm.
And it's because it's not talked about a lot. So I'm actually happy that we're having this talk today to kind of share that there's a lot more of us out here who are looking for that special connection and are unable to find it because we're kind of hiding behind it, right? Because
Mhm.
somehow it's embarrassing not to have a friend or, right? But no, it's
Yeah.
not. We're adults and we are making our lives, and you got to juggle all these things, and you got to also find a balance. And that's where your friends come in, right?
Mhm.
Um, you have your kids, you have your spouse, and then you got to have time away from that so that you can decompress,
I
step
agree.
away, recharge so that you can come back and be a better mom and be a better wife and just be a better person. Because when you have that downtime, you you kind of get to miss, your kids and your husband, right? You're not constantly in each
Yes.
other's space, right?
Yep.
So and you're not as annoyed as you would technically be being around
Hmm.
them all the time. And so, for that reason, I feel that we need to make a lot more noise around this,
Hmm.
and just
Yeah.
encourage adults to come out and say, look, I'm looking for friends
Yeah.
and I want to hang out. And I've seen that actually quite a few times over the last week, where they said, I just moved to the
Hmm.
city. I'm looking for people to meet, to hang out, and so on and so forth. But it seems to be singles, not
Yeah.
couples.
Yeah.
It's
You
very
know,
rare for couples to do because they're their own unity and they feel like they need to find other couples, which is great, right? But you as a woman, you need to have your girl time. You need to have that,
mhm.
feminine energy exchange,
Yes.
especially in business too, because you are driving your business, right? You're in your
Mhm.
masculine energy. And so a lot of that um takes away from your feminine.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you're talking, a lot of things are hitting me, but one of the things that hits me the most is the statistics in the US around loneliness. And they're horrific. I mean, that
They are.
like it's like some massive amount of people feel lonely. I'm sorry I don't have them off the top of my head, but I remember being shocked by them. And I
Hmm.
think part of it, let's think about contributing factors. I live in an area where everyone has moved here. It used to be you were born in a town, you grew up in that town, you were friends with the people your parents were friends with, and that became your social circle. And, people would come and go, but you had this familiarity. And now
Hmm.
people move all the time. I live in a town where a lot of us are just not from here. And they do those kind of things. They do like game night and book clubs and stuff like that. And they have a Facebook group where people post, "Hi, we just moved into the neighborhood, and this is our family, and we'd love to meet new people." And I think it's wonderful.
Hmm.
But what do you see as some of the contributing factors? Is it just us we're moving more, or has our other things changed?
I think it's a combination of it, really, because when you move to a new city, it's exciting, but it's scary and it's new and it's
Mhm.
intimidating. And I think a lot of that really is a lack of trust.
Yeah.
Lack of trust seems to be sort of the top issue for a lot of adults not having friends, not reaching out, not opening up.
Elaborate
Um,
on that a little bit. A lack of
So
trust. In what
I
way?
actually read that. So there was actually a survey that was
Mhm.
conducted, and so that happened to be the number one reason for so many adults. And so I kept thinking about it, and so my theory behind it is really that people are not truly being authentic. And I
Mm,
think a lot of that really has to do with putting up a facade and competing with each other, and all of that can be extremely exhausting. So that's why I am an advocate for authenticity and vulnerability.
mhm.
And, your circle does not have to be big, right? You can
Yeah.
have a couple friends that you are able to be yourself with, that know everything about you
Mhm.
if you're willing to share. So it's really important to lean into that authenticity, to not have to feel like you need to pretend, compete,
Mhm.
um, make things up.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that because one of the questions I had was, I feel like a lot of us hide behind screens. You'll walk into some of these things and then people, it used to be like you'd walk into these things and if you were awkward, you didn't have anywhere to go. So someone just made a question. Now people just grab their phone and start scrolling and it makes them look busy and important. And but they're also not engaging, which kind of defeats the purpose of why they were there in the first place. Because to me, friendships require intimacy and time and
Yes.
patience. um so when we're behind this screen or checking out, I've had it happen where I've seen people checking out what another group of friends is doing, which I feel is, again, detrimental to the current situation that you're in. But do you think that social media plays a huge part in it?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. I sometimes I wish we didn't have these smartphones. I mean, the fact that I'm actually on it talking to you is wonderful, but I think a lot of times it really it makes it impossible for us to connect. Like in this world where we're so connected, we're really disconnected because everybody is, like the one thing that I cannot stand is when I call someone, pick up the phone and they text me back, want to have full on conversation. I'm
Yeah,
like, I just called you. Why are you texting
yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah.
So for me, it's like, okay, that is this interest, this is lack of really understanding and showing empathy. Um, and it just leaves you really unseen and unheard, unvalued.
Mhm.
So as a friend, I always pick up the phone, whether I'm in the middle of something, I say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back in 10,
Yeah.
15, half an hour, right?
Mhm.
Like we have lost this human touch behind these screens.
You know what? I'm guilty of it. I text a lot, and that's usually because I'm running from thing to thing, but I have to agree with you. I think people, especially when I've been trying to cultivate new relationships, when it's only via text, I find that people use that as a way for safety. It's almost as if
Mhm.
they don't trust if they have a real conversation with you. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's a way to be safe. They can think about their response.
Distance, keep you at distance, have to think about,
Mhm.
what they're gonna say. Yeah, definitely. Lack of trust, right?
Yeah, it circles back to that. So
Yeah.
we were talking about some of the idiosyncrasies that have were happening in our current relationship. So what would you recommend? Like, let's say you're in this situation and you're trying to meet new people, and you go to a book club thing or whatever, right? How do you move the conversation? Because I find that what happens when I go to those kind of things is like there are like three safe topics: the weather, your kids, and your job. Like, and everyone says, oh, what do you do? Well, I do this. And what do you do? Oh, that's very interesting. And great. Yeah. How are your kids? How many kids do you have? You have two. Okay, great. Oh, the weather's nice today. Like it just it doesn't
Small
really
talk.
provide you with a
Small talk.
lot of like, connection area. So what would you recommend? Like, what's a conversational strategy or something that you have that can move us beyond the quote unquote safe topics?
So the one thing that I like to do is to ask open-end questions
Hmm.
and start with what was the most exciting thing that happened to you today?
Wow. Now, do you
So,
ever find people like I can see myself doing that and people will be like, whoa, like that's a very
and that's
intimate.
fine. You have to get comfortable with discomfort.
Okay.
You
All
know,
right.
So, but if you have already talked about your kids, you talked about the weather and all of that stuff, right? Then you
Mhm,
can go in and you can say, what was the most exciting thing that happened to you today or this week or something, right?
mhm.
And through that, you can learn a lot about a person.
Sure.
You can
And
learn a lot about their passions, what they value, what they appreciate. And so the main thing is really to be a good listener,
mhm,
to listen, to hear, not to respond. Because a lot of us tend to
mhm.
listen and we're thinking immediately of how we're going to respond. So a lot of us have that to learn and to master, to be
Yeah.
active listeners, to pause,
Mhm.
and that takes practice. That is a skill. A,
You know,
you know,
I agree. It is. And I have to tell you, there's something that I struggle with specifically to women. I find when you ask men to talk about themselves, they are so good at it. They are just like blah, 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 right? But then you talk to a woman, and I'll give you an example. I met someone recently, and for some reason we were emailing, and I said, because she needed something. And so I emailed back and I said, tell me how you're doing with the move. And she was like, oh, the kids are adapting, and and it was everything but her, right? So I actually replied and I said, no, 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 you misunderstood my question. I'm asking about you. And I think it kind of floored her a little bit. I mean, I did get a response, and she's lovely. She's very nice. She's recently moved into the neighborhood. But um, I was just like, I'm like, that's so typical of women that, how are you? Oh, Joe's great. Like this little kid's great. Like, I didn't ask about the kid. That's how you're doing. Right. So maybe getting comfortable with actually being vocal about the things that are going on in your life.
yeah. And I think a lot of women, I don't think I know that a lot of women really put everybody else before themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's why they don't even think about, answering your question with, okay, this is how I'm doing, but this is how the
Mhm.
family and everybody else is doing, because there's this innate need to nurture and to care for and to always have everybody else's best interest at mind and at heart than your own, right? And
Absolutely.
I think that's also one of the things why it's really hard for them to have friendships,
Hmm.
because they're putting their family first and everybody's needs first, and they're really neglecting self-care.
Hmm.
And going out with a friend, having lunch is a form of self-care.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Just
maintaining.
having conversation about something other than school, something other than lunches, something other than bills, right? It's something that we have to intentionally do and practice and really work on first, developing within, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of that really stems from not feeling enough, maybe fear of being judged, always going above and beyond because you don't want to be seen as unhelpful
Yeah.
and uncaring and unnurturing. Like that's a bad thing, right? But you can never
Mhm.
be that. You've always been enough. You are always going to be enough. But it's this inner voice that just keeps you stuck, and a lot of that keeps you isolated and keeps you alone.
Yeah, the fear of being judged, I think, is a big one, especially when it comes to women.
Mhm.
I've definitely been at tables of women just meeting each other and be like, "Oh, how's your kid? Oh, he just got into this and he's doing so well." And the next woman comes and she's not going to say, "Look, my kid's suffering," right? She's going to say, "Oh, well, yeah, he's doing this and that." And then the next one that he's doing this and that. And then there's always one woman who looks at them all and says, "Honestly, guys, things aren't great." And then suddenly the stories are coming out. So, you know, I've tried to be that woman many a time to just say, Yeah, you know what?" And then I have to tell you, there definitely have been times, warning to anyone who's listening to this, there are definitely times when I've adopted that strategy and the women have not responded, which is probably the worst feeling in the world because it's like you were vulnerable and they decided not to be, which is
But
awful.
you were authentic.
Yeah.
You were authentic, and it takes a lot to be
Yeah.
authentic,
Yeah. And I
to
might,
really strip it all down and show the world that
mhm,
you're not perfect, right?
no,
None of us are perfect. And
no.
if someone is saying that they're perfect, or it appears that they have this perfect life, that is a lie. That is a mask, that is a
100%.
facade. There's no perfect life, right? It might be perfect for you, but things are always going to be happening.
Yep.
It's just that you need to choose your priorities. You got to choose what's important to you, your values, right?
Mhm.
And you got to abide by them. You got to set boundaries in place as well. Like, let's say,
Yeah.
your family needs you, but you need to go out, or you actually decided you're going to have lunch with your friend, or you're going to go shopping or something, right?
Mhm.
Then, unless it's an absolute emergency, you stick to your plan,
Yeah.
because nobody values your time more than you.
Mhm.
So you got to learn to value your time.
Yeah.
Your kids
I
are going to be there. Your husband is going to be there. When you come back, you're going to be refreshed. You're going to be a lot more loving. You're going
mhm.
to have a better energy, and everything around you is going to feel lighter too.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I went through a period of what I called speed dating women. Yeah, not really dating, but like looking for
I get
friends.
it. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went out to coffee, like I just tried to find them in different venues. And there was one time, really, really great person. I was so excited to meet her for coffee, and my kid threw up. And I'm like, ugh, but I'm like, you know what? I know they're not sick. They threw up because they ate something they shouldn't have. And the babysitter's here. I'm not leaving them alone. I'm gonna go. And normally I would have canceled. I have to like normally I would have canceled, but I'm like, you know what? It's taken us 4 weeks to find a time that we can both make it. The kid's fine. So I went, and she's actually now one of my closest friends. So it turned out well, might not have, but it turned out well in that aspect. Um, One thing I do want to touch base on though, now that we've
Mhm.
talked about some of the things, is um the culture differences in the different areas. I'm from originally from the Northeast. Well, I've lived across the world, but I've lived in the Northeast, I've lived in California, I've lived in the South. And I have to tell you, it's very different making friends in each of those areas because of the culture. I find specifically in the South, you have to put in a lot more time. Like
Mhm.
Northeasterners get familiar much quicker than Southerners do. Southerners, there's a lot more barriers and hoops to go over until they
Mhm.
consider you a friend and not an acquaintance.
Mhm.
Which basically, if you're their friend, they're inviting you over to dinner. So, do you have any comments on that, or like thoughts around it? As someone who has
I can
moved
see
yourself.
I can see your point, and yes, so when I moved from Europe, where um, I had a group of friends, I actually had a number of friends.
Mhm.
When I came here, I had no friends.
Yeah.
And so I knew someone who lived in my complex at that time who introduced me to her friends, but it was more for like mocking
Mhm.
because I didn't speak English and I was just making fun. It was making her look better. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, from that perspective, I've definitely felt that pain of being the outsider, of not fitting in, and all of that. But as an adult, fortunately, I was pretty lucky, to meet people who are very objective when it comes to, the way I like to meet, up. And when I have time, like they're very flexible with me.
Mhm.
And so, one of the things I think as well with the technology today, it allows you to be more in touch. Yes, maybe not in person, but we got FaceTime
Yeah.
capabilities, right?
Yeah.
So you can leave a voice note instead of a
Mhm.
text. Because when you have that face to face contact, when you have that auditory, sensation from listening to someone, a voicemail, all of that creates emotions within,
Yep.
right? That you can use to really connect with one another. So, yes, there are going to be places where things are going to be harder. There's going to be places where it's like you just met someone and you're like, oh, you're my best friend.
Yeah.
you know so it's just, I guess, being objective about it, learning, being curious, and not taking things personally, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody doesn't invite you to dinner, that's okay. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean they don't like you, although your head is going to start telling you, oh my gosh, they don't like me. Did I say something? Did
Uh-huh.
I offend them? Did I like, you're going to go down and maybe they just meant to have like intimate gathering, and
Yeah.
you just do not belong in that just yet. But I think we all have the responsibility to keep in touch,
Mhm.
because we can control how others do and respond, but we can control how we respond and what we do, what action we take to nurture that. So it's really up to us to
Mhm.
determine, okay, is this person really somebody that I want to invest my time in? And then
Sure.
go and take action, make that investment in that person and get
Of
to know
course.
them.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because it's like, I mean, that's scientifically proven, right? Like hearing
Yeah.
someone's voice, being around them, it's going to create more intimacy. Just we're at the end of the day, we're just that's who we are as
Hmm.
I'm curious to hear you talk now that you've told us you've come over from Europe and stuff. What were some of the ways that you met people and you made friends?
So when I came to the US, I was 18. So I was
Mhm.
in school.
Mhm.
So in
Okay.
school, I mean, going every day because I was actually working adult and I went to school.
Yeah.
So I had friends at work and I had friends at school. And then
Mhm.
I had friends that I hung out with on the weekends. So you can have different cluster of friends.
Sure.
So let's say you're interested in spirituality and you like art,
Mhm.
right? And so you might have a group of friends that that love arts and like to go explore galleries and
Yeah.
and enjoy art. And then you have
Mhm.
those who are more holistic and spiritual, and maybe you go on a retreat over the weekend.
Yep.
And so I've always looked for ways to connect with those that really made me feel really fulfilled on the inside. And I
Mhm.
always blocked those that I felt bad vibes with, those that are just constantly complaining, constantly sharing their problems. Nobody wants to hear about that drama. Right.
No.
So keep the drama for your mama.
Yeah.
Um,
Or at
and
least
so,
wait till you can, like, till
or
you're at
wait
that
till you
point.
can, I mean, there's times where you can vent, and that's great. Like, you have that one friend where you're like, I cannot tell you what happened to me today, da 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 da, right?
Yeah.
But it's really choosing where you feel good
Yeah.
and where you have commonalities with,
Yeah.
because it's easier to connect through that
Hmm.
than to, let's say, like, I'm not a sporty person. I don't like football games. Like, if I had a friend who absolutely loved football games, they would not be my friend for long, because
Yeah.
I don't see myself in their world.
Yeah.
I am more, let's walk on the beach. Like, let's go grab coffee and walk on the beach and have a talk, right?
Yeah.
Or like dig our toes in the sand kind of thing. I'm not there among people screaming, yelling, cheering. That's just not me.
Yeah.
I'll go in, I'll experience it maybe once or twice, which I have,
Hmm.
but I don't think that, because if that's your thing, you go do that with your friends. You and I can do something else together on this
Yeah.
side. And so that's how I really go about meeting friends. Like, right now I'm pretty busy with life,
Hmm.
and so I've met some friends through my son's school.
Sure.
P, you know P Basically, you have
PTA. Yeah.
PTA.
Mm.
Exactly. Um you have any type of like volunteering, if there's any nonprofit organizations that you're into, all of these things. I mean, you can meet friends just about anywhere.
Yeah. So
And
what are, go ahead.
go
Sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, so what are some of the unique things you do to maintain your friendships? I know you always pick up the phone. That's one of the things you said. But do you do other unique things?
I do, like, when throughout a week I see something that reminds me of somebody, like, let's say on social media, a meme or something, like, I send it to them, like, oh, I thought of you when I saw this.
Yep.
And so it just, it makes them feel special. So what I used to do as well is, in the mornings, like, I had a group where I would send like a little inspirational message, like, have a wonderful day, you're amazing, don't forget, you're incredible,
Hmm.
and something to lift their spirits. Like,
Sure.
I want to be the friend who gives you energy and doesn't take the energy away from you. And
Yeah.
so I value that. I love to go shopping, like, let's say when I want to have new clothes, or I want to
Mhm.
have a reason to get new clothes, like, I call up a friend and say, hey, do you have any time this weekend or next weekend or whatever, and so there's a lot of spontaneity too
Mhm.
in my life.
Mhm.
So, but I have to check in with my husband, because he likes to go play golf. He has his life too,
Yep.
because I pushed him in that direction, because he has been just sitting around the house and just moping and, like, wanting to start
Mm.
golf. And he wouldn't do it for a whole year. He kept saying, how our neighbors are going and
Mhm.
how he would love to go. But I'm like, why don't you go?
Yeah. And he
Why
was
don't
like,
you go? And he goes, well, I don't know, this and that. I'm like, they're going every Sunday, so why don't you go with them? And
yeah.
he didn't go until I actually bought him a set of golf clubs.
And
So I'm
you're
like,
like, just get out the house.
I had to give him the nudge. I'm like, you need to go and have something outside the home and outside the garage and outside the
Mhm.
home projects.
Mhm.
And right now, he has been at it for 2 years. He gets up every Sunday at 6 a.m. and goes plays. And,
Yeah.
so sometimes you need someone to push you in that direction, or you need to push your spouse in that direction. But it's everybody deserves to have their time and their friends, and make it work for them.
Well, yeah, I always tell people it's a part of a rich life. I think when you're very ambitious and very career focused and all, you can tend to lose sight of that, right? Like, but part of a rich life is rich relationships. I mean, at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
what are you going to really remember? And it's going to be the relationships in your life more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Um, so I now have my evergreen question, which I
Okay.
ask of every person that comes on the podcast. So what is a weird habit or ritual you have that makes your life more joyful?
So, one of the things that may not be pretty common, but I talk to myself a lot.
So do I. But yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, whenever I have to make a decision, I actually talk to myself and it's pretty loud.
Yeah.
And so, it was funny because when I told my husband, he goes, only crazy people do that. I'm like, are you calling me crazy? No, but that was his upbringing.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I understood that. So I didn't take that as, I kind of took it as a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But I said, no, intelligent people talk to themselves.
Yeah. I talk to myself all the time.
Talk
I
to
talk to myself in the
themselves, and it's
shower.
really kind of checking in with yourself. And so what I do is whenever there is a dilemma in my life or something I have to make a decision on, is I talk to myself.
Yeah.
And it helps me. It helps me see it from a different angle. It helps me kind of hear my thoughts as well.
Of
Because
course.
sometimes we're so programmed that everything is so subconscious, so that when you actually have a conversation with yourself, you become a lot more conscientious
Hmm.
of, what you're saying, and then you
Yeah.
can get yourself in check.
Yeah. Definitely. I do that all the time. I have conversations with myself all the time. My
Yeah.
husband walks in, he's like, "Oh my God, you're doing it again." But I'm
Talking.
like, "Yes, yes, I did." Well, Isla, it's been an absolute pleasure to having you. I have learned a lot about relationships and you've given me a different perspective and maybe encouraged me to maybe try a few new things that I've had in the back of my mind. But for those of you that want to learn more about Isla, she has a book coming out this fall, and you can see all the ways you can connect with her by viewing the links in the show notes. As always, I'd love to hear from you about this episode. How have you made friends or not made friends later on in life? Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Farrah Haidar. Also, I'm giving away a PDF of some of the best quotes we've had on the show, beautifully designed to print and journal your thoughts. Email me at farrah@farrahhaidar.com and title it Quotes. Talk to you soon. Till then, chase your happy.